Hello, everyone. We will be getting started in just 2 minutes. Hello, and welcome to When Spending Money Saves Money, making software purchases on a limited budget. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Amy Thacker, the marketing manager at Akkadian Labs. We're a software company specializing in Cisco solutions. Today we have Kristin Zimmerman, EVP of Global Sales for Akkadian Labs. She'll be presenting. As a software company executive and a Cisco veteran, Chris is able to share best practices in receiving IT project approvals. If at any time during the presentation you have any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature. At the end of the presentation, we will have time to answer questions. Chris, would you like to get started?
Hey, thanks, Amy. Welcome, everyone. I'm assuming you've all joined because your organizations have unlimited funds for your IT software requests. Well, as Amy mentioned, I'm EVP of Sales for Akkadian Labs, and we find that our clients actually have to put together a justification for our software, and chances are you do too. All joking aside, I think we all could agree that there's more scrutiny than ever in getting projects approved, especially if the software's real value is in productivity savings. This is more difficult to prove, but it's not impossible. Today, I'm going to offer a framework of ideas on getting your expenditure for software projects approved through your organization. You most likely have had personal reasons for wanting to procure and implement certain types of software. Perhaps there's considerable productivity improvements or efficiencies that directly benefit you and your team. And obviously, there would be reasons that the organization as a whole would win. You are all professionals with lots of demands on your time, so you don't need to waste your time on proof of concepts or projects that will never go anywhere. You just want to get it done. So as Amy mentioned, over the next 50 minutes or so, we'll cover 3 key themes that will help you with your project justifications and the steps involved. During this time, Amy will monitor the chat window for questions, and after we go through all of these steps, we'll attempt to answer a few of these. Before I outline the steps in putting your justification together, let's examine what not to do, the pitfalls that you should avoid most of the time. It's not easy, or you can't always avoid every pitfall. However, if you put these in front of you for most of the time, your chances for success are greater. Obviously, the more costly the project, the more attention to details you must have. So, here are the pitfalls to avoid. Underestimating the costs. Underestimating the time involved in the implementation. Overestimating the savings and the benefits. using the wrong evaluation criteria, failing to find a project sponsor, and the most critical of all is failing to align your purchase with the company's strategy. So by following the steps outlined in our webinar today, most of these pitfalls can be avoided. However, not always. It is difficult to avoid all snags. The size and the scope of your project will determine the difficulty in correctly estimating implementation time and therefore costs. So, my advice to you is you may want to estimate savings and benefits on the conservative side. How good are you at juggling? Juggling in this context can be learned, and we're going to talk about it and how to do it, because you don't want to be this type of juggler when beginning your ROI process on what you believe is a very necessary software purchase for your organization and company. There are 3 key games to play, and you need to juggle them all at once. And these are 3 key games in gaining approval for your purchase: the financial, the political game, and the communication game. And they all need to be juggled at once. Creating a compelling financial picture of the benefits gained with the new technology is the first game, and it is vitally important, and it must be played well. However, creating a complex spreadsheet with ROI calculations does not always guarantee you the nod from the ultimate decision maker. How many of you have had what you thought was the most compelling justification put together only to find out that it went nowhere, that it was stalled, or it was put on hold and hold? That's most likely because there is this hidden game in gaining management approval, and it is called political persuasion. There's also the fine art to the game of communication. You can be adept at politics and still miss the key component if your communication is not effective. So let's look at all of these as they intertwine and how we juggle them to make for a successful justification project. There are 7 steps to success, and in most cases, you need to do all to gain the outcome you want. Remember, we're talking about non-budgeted items, building a compelling case to gain budget or justify a purchase when dollars are tight. So, just like in many things in life, the first step is the most important. You need to understand who the decision maker is on the project. Who is the person that will ultimately approve or nix your project? This is the person that you must meet with to discuss your project, preferably before you even start looking for a vendor or a specific project. We call it testing the water. And this is the heart of the political persuasion game. It will set up how you'll need to communicate the actual financial justification. Step 2, who is your internal champion or project sponsor who is well thought of? This is also a part of the political game. Is there another department or organization in your company that would benefit from implementing the tool that you are seeking? You want to talk to the internal champion and discover how they think your new purchase would benefit their department. And you want to take notes. The key point here is you want to gain valuable information as to what's important to the decision maker and what approach works best. You want to take notes, and you want to listen with your ears and take good notes so that you can follow up with your project sponsor or internal champion and really learn what it's going to take to get this through. Step 3 is to meet with the decision maker. You want to know how much time you have for the meeting and stick to the time. And you don't want to go over. And what I like to do is give a time check with about 10 minutes left to ask their permission to go over if necessary. You really want to show that you're valuing their time. And the goals of the meeting are to alert the decision maker to the problems that you're facing. Explain how you think the technology could help solve it, and understand what would persuade him or her to okay the purchase. Remember, test the water image. That's what it's about. If the decision maker is not your boss, get your boss to participate in approaching the executive. The two of you should schedule that meeting with the decision maker And before you meet, strategize how to best approach that person. When you are meeting with a decision maker, you want to have prepared questions, you want to listen, and you want to take notes. This is the communication aspect of the juggling act, and it's very critical to have your communication outline prepared while asking key questions. And I'll go into more details, but the main point is to discover exactly what information that person is going to need to make a decision. So let's talk about preparing for meeting with your decision maker. You want to get to the ask up front. The more senior the decision maker, the more you have to be mindful of this. And here's a great outline that I've used for a lot to put my initial thoughts, and you can put your benefits down and help you outline your communication. But let me give you an example of what I'm talking about in getting to the ask up front, so when you do meet with the decision maker. An example might be something like this. Susan, our company is looking to achieve 15% growth year over year next year while not adding any incremental headcount in our IT operations. Our group is already stretched thin in working projects that are critical to that growth. We've made a large investment in infrastructure, but our support model has lagged considerably, which is causing burnout of our top engineers. So I'd like to propose a software purchase that will completely automate repetitive tasks and most likely give us back 2 full-time equivalents. These FTEs can be utilized on our growth initiative projects, thereby accelerating the benefits of our earlier investments. I'd like to gain your support in pursuing this project and purchase. Here's another great example outline of how to approach your draft idea with an executive or decision maker. I suggest that you actually write down answers for each of these and think about what you're asking the decision maker to do and how it will benefit the company. It is important to get this framework right, thinking it through before you meet with a decision maker. And after you present your situation, what the benefits are to the company, and you get permission to move forward, here's some questions you want to ask that decision maker. How do you see this purchase fitting in with our corporate strategy? What financial calculations do you base your purchasing decisions on? What evaluation criteria do you prefer? Return on investment, net present value, simple return, or just simple payback? Another question to ask might be, would you like to compare 2 or 3 vendors' costs in the study, or just the finalists that we choose? And this will vary depending upon what you are proposing and who the decision maker is. We talked about juggling financial, political, and communication skills all at once. At this point, after meeting with a decision maker, it's a good idea to befriend someone from finance or accounting. And you're going to need someone who can help you with calculating the financial return formulas, who has experience in creating cost-benefit and ROI analyses, that can help you gather the data and prepare the number justification. You want someone who can understand how the company purchases software. And here's another critical thing. Even if you do not have the budget and your decision maker said, you know, if it's a great payback, you can go ahead and we can look at it. You then need to understand available budgets in your company that could assist the decision maker in your proposal. Just because it's not budgeted in your department does not mean you can't get it through. Step 4 is quantify the benefits. This requires a little bit of effort, but it's really the fun part of an ROI or cost-benefit analysis. In it, you calculate the anticipated savings associated with using the proposed tool. CIOs and their IT organizations are faced with endless demands on their time and resources, so it is critically important to focus on identifying and solving the big issues that really matter most to them. The software must do one of 2 things. It either has to save the company money or it has to bring in new revenue. So you need to ask yourself, will the tool improve productivity, reduce headcount, improve efficiencies, perhaps avoid costly mistakes, or minimize downtime? This, again, is where you quantify the benefits. Here's a good example. One of the top initiatives for IT is finding ways to reduce costs and improve efficiencies. So let me offer an example here. In a support center, benefits generally boil down to one mainline item, a reduced headcount. By improving productivity or reducing time required for any human-mediated activity, eventually you arrive at a lower headcount. But just be aware that this might get a little tricky when you start discussing reduced headcount because representatives get nervous, some because they think they'll lose their jobs, and on the other hand, executives get kind of excited because they think they can actually cut out headcount. What really happens, though, is when you increase productivity in a support center, you are decreasing the increase in needed headcount. Without tools to increase productivity, the demand for more agents in the support center increases in direct proportion to a growing user base or the number of products sold. So if you think about your company, if it's in a growth phase and you're not adding productivity tools, you will need to add more headcount. So this is just one area that you could take a look at. Step 5 is quantifying the cost. You need to consider the total cost of ownership over 3 to 5 years or whatever the exact time frame is for your own organization. This is an area where your chosen vendor or your vendors can help you with it. The first 3 items above are generally considered capitalized costs, which means they can be reported on a balance sheet of the company and depreciated over the life of the asset. Be sure to check with your finance friend about capitalized versus non-capitalized items because they may have a different opinion on the situation. But typically, they are the software costs, the cost to procure the software, if there are any associated hardware costs with it, like a server or new infrastructure or something like that, and the implementation costs. The non-capitalized costs are things like the annual maintenance or support contract. Are there upgrade costs for the life of the purchase? Are there any future consulting fees? What about the salary costs, which are fully burdened, of any additional internal headcount needed to maintain the system? And then you also want to find out, are there any future training costs associated? So again, the capitalized costs, what it costs to procure the software, any associated hardware costs, implementation costs, and then the ongoing support needed. Step 6 is preparing the financial justification. This is the step where you put it all together. You already know how complex your study must be because your decision maker told you when you met with him or her. Perhaps you are lucky enough to possess a copy of an ROI analysis that was approved in the past. You can use that. You can copy the basic format and all the formulas used in that study and improve on them if you can. Once you've completed the legwork described in steps 3, 4, and 5, you're ready to return to your finance friend and start to work on the analysis. You want him or her to help you with your assumptions, all your costs that you've gathered from your vendors, all the benefits that you think the software will do for the company, and this is where you put your return on investment. You also want to use your financial friend to help you prepare a document that will summarize all the findings and the quantifiable benefits outlined in step 4. The key point here is sometimes the soft dollar benefits can be more compelling than fancy financial formulas. They could be improved customer satisfaction and loyalty, improved company image, improved employee satisfaction and loyalty. It could be better management data and reporting. As I mentioned, the soft dollar benefits can sometimes be more compelling. I'll give you a good example from our company. Our company sold software to an organization who had an employee inadvertently take down their entire global voice services due to improper access to the system. So our software was justified on being able to partition access and therefore alleviate this from happening again. It all had to do with a security breach. Maybe your company is looking more at your company image, and maybe you're losing top talent to other more innovative companies. And that might alone help you justify your software. Step 7 is presenting this to the decision maker. If you've done all your homework in steps 1 through 6, you now should feel very confident in approaching your decision maker with your findings. Most likely, as part of the political persuasion piece of the juggling act, you've kept the decision maker up to date of the testing and all of the high-level activities. Hopefully, you've included your boss and all the key stakeholders. But now is the time where you shine. And typically in today's fast-paced environment, the justification is sent via email, and then you hope it gets looked at. I would highly recommend that if you want your proposal to be acted on, that you meet with the decision maker again, and if it's not face-to-face, you want to do it either via a WebEx or some other mode of communication in order for you to control the conversation and outcome. You want to go back to that communication outline and make sure you prepare not only the document, but how you want the meeting to flow to maximize your time. Here's what you need to bring to the meeting. You need to bring a document that summarizes the findings and the quantifiable benefits. You want to have that prepared document that your financial friend has helped you with that provides the following: assumptions, the costs, the benefits, and the return on investment. This is very critical, and as I mentioned before, you definitely want to be prepared. Einstein said it best. It sounds pretty straightforward, right? But we all know simplicity has to do with mastery and developing the muscles to make it look easy. If you watch a professional golfer hit the ball, they make it look so easy. But we all know that that professional golfer has mastered the shot with years of practice to make it look easy. You need to know your material well and anticipate questions or objections. Remember, get to the ask up front and be confident that you have done your homework and prepared for this meeting. Make sure you know how to explain the benefits simply, because in the juggling act, the communication of the message is critical. Now is not the time to go down the technical rabbit hole. You want to go back to that outline of what am I asking that decision maker to do? Have I clearly stated the benefits the company will get from this purchase? Am I appealing to his or her initial criteria and avoiding those pitfalls that we discussed in the beginning of this webinar? You want to prepare with intention. It is much harder to simplify the ask than go on and on, so you want to avoid the rabbit hole. We talked about 3 games at once, and this is very important. Go back to your communication outline and use it. Sometimes the best proposals do not get acted upon, and it's not due to the fact that they weren't good proposals. It has to do that the executive did not really understand what you were asking. So it's very important that you know his or her style of listening and what level of detail they need and use it. It might be a good idea before you actually go to this decision maker, after you've strategized with your boss and you've laid it all out and you've got your documents together, that you talk to your project sponsor, your internal champion, and maybe walk him or her through what you are going to present to your decision maker. And make sure if there are any holes or any misunderstandings, get his or her input. I mentioned before, this is very, very critical time, and a lot of proposals don't get acted on just because the decision maker or executive didn't understand. And if you do have to email it because you can't get face-to-face or can't do it via a WebEx, then it is more critical than ever that the explanation is simple and that the decision maker understands exactly what you're asking. How much money are you asking for, and what is the specific return and the quantifiable benefits? So with that, Amy, I'm going to go to any questions from our audience.
Great. Actually, we did get a couple questions. The first one is about that step where you say to find your friend in finance. How do you make friends with that person? How do you identify who that finance person is?
Okay, good question. And depending upon the size of the organization, oftentimes there is an actual financial analyst assigned to various departments. And I would think in an IT organization, you probably have somebody that works with you. If you don't know who that person is, it's a good idea to ask for advice from your project sponsor. Who in the past have you worked with? Who's a really good financial analyst that can help me prepare the ROI? That's just a simple question. Your boss might know. Or when you talk to your decision maker back in the beginning, when you want to test the waters, that's another good time to say, hey, who in particular is a good finance person that I can work with to make sure that all my calculations measure up to what you're looking for?
Great. And it seems like, Chris, once you test the waters, you do this once. This is a repeatable process, and that relationship would just continue to get better, and you could keep using that same relationship. Does that seem right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one other thing as you're going through this, when you meet with a decision maker, the first time to test the water, you want to understand his or her criteria and how much he wants to be informed of the project. Some decision makers want to know every detail and want maybe daily updates, depending, again, the size and scope of the project. Others may say, hey, look, after a couple of weeks and you've tested this and it looks like it's moving forward, can you just give me a status? Or another thing you might find, depending upon the size of the organization, is that you give a quick summary to your boss once a week, and he or she takes it to the decision maker just to keep him in the loop. You don't want to wait till the very end. As I mentioned, depending upon the size, decision makers are very, very busy, and they've got other projects. You've heard of fire drills that come along, and sometimes those fire drills become front and center. And while yours had every good intention of getting through, suddenly it is not being seen as important, even though you know it could be. So it's critical to keep abreast of the politics that are happening, what fire drills are happening, and that you keep your tasks on hand with your decision maker if, like I said, he or she wants all those details.
Well, I have another question actually about that relationship and meeting with the decision maker. You mentioned it's best to have a meeting right from the inception of the idea of this project, and to see if the decision maker thinks it's viable. What happens if the decision maker doesn't see the value and doesn't think that the project is a good idea? How should you proceed then?
No, that's a really good question. One of the reasons that we're even, talking about sharing some of these ideas is because my company, we are in the software business. And oftentimes we will get into testing with people who the projects are not going to go anywhere. And what we're trying to do is help people understand that proof of concepts or testing just for the sake of doing it probably isn't a good idea if the decision maker says, look, I really can see the benefits here, but right now we absolutely have no money, and the company is not looking to make these kinds of changes right now at all. We've got bigger fish to fry as an example. Why waste your time? Why not work on something you know is going to potentially go through? And by the way, even if he says, yes, go ahead and proceed with a proof of concept or test, or, to pursue, maybe not even a test, but pursue putting a proposal together, that doesn't always mean it's going to go through either. We know that. But you have a much greater chance of success if you get the decision maker involved with you up front to get his or her, okay, yes, this is something we could actually look at. I hope that helps.
No, that makes sense to me. Now, how about how much support could you expect from a vendor? You mentioned that we make software and we're often on the vendor side of this process.
So what I would ask, I think you should be able to get a lot. Obviously, the vendor wants to sell you their software. And if you already believe in it and you want it, he or she on the vendor side can help you put your case together. So I would absolutely get that person on your side to say, look, we're interested in making this happen. Here's what I'm looking for. And you should have him or her be able to help you with the quantifiable benefits especially. And maybe some really good examples that other customers have used, some good references that show, this particular company saved X amount of dollars or was able to not have to add additional headcount over a 5-month period because they used your tool. Something like that. You should absolutely be able to get some help.
Awesome. Well, Chris, did you have any final thoughts for us?
No. I just would say that you can become a good juggler, getting your proposals acted on, getting the money. It is a skill. And just like juggling, you need to practice, and you need to understand all those 3 concepts: financial, political, and the communication. As I mentioned before, if you understand the decision maker's process and you gain that internal champion, present the benefits and justification simply, then you will be a successful juggler who gets it done. You don't want to waste your time on technical testing and proof of concepts if you don't know the decision-making process or company strategy. So thank you for your time today, and happy juggling. We will post the presentation and recording within 24 hours, so you can review it or you can share it. Thank you all very much.